Okay, I'm going to work on this background a little more today. I'm going to show you a couple of other techniques that you can use. One of the, of course, I deviated from the original image just to kind of shorten the work on this demo, and I used the peach from the first project, but now I've started to add a little more complexity by working negative space, and I borrowed some colors from one of the other images that I sent you, and I decided I wanted to use a color in the background from that pear image here. Okay, so I'm going to continue working on that, but one other thing I wanted to do to add to the complexity, I don't have enough room to add another object, but what I'm going to do is develop a little of this area here. And one of the ways I wanted to develop some of that was by showing you another tool that you can use. I want to pull a little of this blue all the way over, and I still want to darken it over on this side here. It's still a little soft. I want my ground to have a little more strength in the image, but I don't want it to be just the tabletop flat, with chromatic variation in it. So I have a tool. All of this is a wax crayon. It's pure wax. It's just like a candle. Now you might experiment to see if a candle can work, so you don't have to buy one of these. I was able to find this over at Jerry's, and simply because it's much closer to me than Hobby Lobby, and I was headed that way, so I just stopped in on the way to have a car repaired and picked these up. So I don't know if Hobby Lobby has them. I really didn't look for it the time I was there, and I don't know if Michael's has them. I'm sure if they had them, they'd have them online, but they may not have everything in the store. So what I'm going to use this for is I'm going to add a little more interest to the negative space. I'm going to take my wax crayon and I'm going to, it's tough because you can't really see what you're doing, but I'm going to block the paper, and it's going to show up when I add a little of the blue to the surface here. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to strengthen that background. I'm going to apply some water because it's such a big area, but I'm not going to saturate it so much to the point where I'm going to have to wait a long time for it to dry. And by the way, I went ahead and broke down and bought a hair dryer. All right. I was actually surprised that I could find one. Everything it looks more like a curling iron now. They're kind of hard to find. So that might help here. I'm going to moisturize this part of the paper as well. I want to stay away from the peach because I don't really need to do anything in the peach. So I want to keep that dry. Alright, and now I'm going to go ahead and pick up some blue. I'm going to use the big brush, and if you've had painting with me before, painting 1, painting 2, you know that one of the things that I like to repeat myself over and over is in regards to the painting process, where you're better off using more than one brush to paint with. One to apply the paint, another one to move it around, okay, to blend. Very much like you would in a drawing, where you're applying and then using your hand or a blending stick to change the appearance and to blend or smudge. All right, so I'm going to add a little blue here. I'm going to go ahead and strengthen the shadow. Pick up a little more pigment. And I really want something A little more dramatic back here this time around. Okay. Oh. Okay, now I'm going to start pulling some over to the white area. Water. I want it to be relatively light because my light source is coming from this direction. I know it's a little hard to see. Let me darken this blue a tiny bit more here. I'm going to start over here. And I'm going to pull a little more of the blue over this area. But you can barely see the white streaks that I used here to create, that I created with the, let me put a little bit more over this, so that you can see what the wax crayon does. It's a resist. So in other words, it's going to block the pores of the paper and keep the watercolor from seeping in to the paper in those areas. Right. Now what I want to do is turn those into folds. And I'll do that. It's going to take a little while. And what I may do is just take this up to a certain degree and work on it out of camera range, and then just talk about the end result so that you're not having to stick around quite so long. Now, while I'm waiting for this to dry a little bit, I talked about a little bit of color theory before, and especially when I mentioned it might be good to have a color wheel available or at your disposal so that you can utilize it when needed. I want to quiet this color down. Yeah, it's a nice earth color, but I want to swipe the intensity down a notch. And so if I look at my color wheel, what I'm looking at happening back there is like an ochre color with a little green, so it's somewhere right in here. So what I'm going to need to calm it down, so you see a lot of ochre in this area, is when you want to diminish intensity, you use the color's complement. So if I look across, the complement is going to be in the blue family. Okay, so since I have blue that I've used down below, I'm going to use some of it up above, just so that you can see what happens when a little blue goes over that ochre color. I'm going to spread it quickly because I don't want it to only happen here. Alright, you just took it down a notch. And it still looks ochre. You still see the ochre color in it, but now it's just a little weaker. Okay, just a little weaker. Do it again. Okay, so now, you know, in creating that background area, I've got phthalo green that I added on top of a yellow ochre, or a yellow. So I have yellow, phthalo green, and then yellow ochre, and now the blue over the top. So, you know, it just gives you an idea that you can layer quite a bit of color on top of each other. However, you know, one of the things you do have to be careful about is, yeah, you can put 10 layers of color in a watercolor. But what you have to be careful of is, remember, every time you're layering, you're taking away a trace of what was underneath. So the more layering, what you run the risk of doing is taking away the trace of the paper, which intensifies your color. Okay, so you always want to keep that in mind, that you could possibly outdo yourself by weakening color because the echo of white in the paper is gone. Okay, all right, so I'm going to let this dry a little, And of course I'm going to use a little of my, or put my dryer to use. I don't want to get too close, not for that reason, but if you try to dry and put that dryer so close, it's going to really cause the paper to stretch quickly, and then it may start pulling up on your tape more than you'd like for it to, and it's going to require a little work to get rid of that buckle in the paper. So I'm giving myself a bit of distance here. All right, that's taken the wetness out. I'd still like to strengthen this upper corner here. So I'm going to take a little of the blue, and I'm going to wake up this phthalo green, because it is a little on the dark side. I'm going to mix it with a little of my blue, and I'm also going to bring a little of my crimson red so I can strengthen the dark here. I'm going to keep another brush handy so that I can move this paint around. I don't want to wet the paper, because I'd like for this, the strength of this color to be a little bit more dramatic, and I just don't want to weaken it so much. All right, so I'm going to start here. Dip into some water. I'm going to use a little pressure here with my brush to help with the transition. Because I want to maintain the strength of this color in this area and not have to keep pulling it this way for blending. Okay. Now, with the addition of the white, not the white, but the wax crayon, I want to bring out, see if I can do this without getting my head in the way. I want to use just a little bit of the blue to work as or serve as a shadow along the edge of that. I want it to be quiet though, I don't want it to be a real dramatic dark. I can see my wax right here. I'm just going to rub a little bit of that right here. And I'm going to also darken a little above it. Just kind of let it fizzle out. And there's another one right here that curves a little. And then there's one right here. Here we go. Okay. Darken this. And darken that. Hopefully my gray head isn't in the way. Just so that it looks like I have a little more design complexity, adding to surface variation here by having, just trying to see where my head is in relation to the camera. Pick up. Probably need a little of this gray here, this blue gray coming down to help raise this edge up. Now you might be wondering, okay, so what do you do about that wax when you're done? When you use as little of it as I have, you can just leave it there. You're not going to see it. But if you do use an excessive amount, you can always just take something like a razor blade and just lightly scrape it off, and then you're going to not have that appearance. Now, in my last demonstration, I told you I wanted to bring some white, just to show you how to you can use the white. One of those rules that you break, don't use white, well, you can use it. How I could put it to use here, but it's going to require some time to dry, to allow things to dry. And so I may add one last little component to this demonstration here to finish this off. I'm going to darken so you can see that more distant raised. Let me do this. So you can see it a little more clearly. I'm actually going to bring this down to make a slight connection to that shadow. Okay, so now I've got stuff happening back there. The other thing I wanted to do is to shift a little weight in the background. And you know, you've got what looks almost like a landscape with that horizon line, but what I want to do is to change it up a little, and I'm going to pretty much just mix all my hues together and take a little blue, a little of the yellow ochre, a little of the phthalo green, and whatever's left of my crimson. I'm going to bring them all together here. A little of this ultramarine. I think this is cobalt. I'm not sure which one it is. And I'm also going to throw in just a tiny bit of black. I think after this demo, I think I need to clean out my tray to make sure that my residue of watercolor is clean again. And I'm going to use my flat brush because I just want to create the suggestion of something in the distance here. Probably hit that with another layer. Right. Okay. And for the sake of the composition, I'm going to take a little of that and pull a little here. You know, one of the considerations of design, of course, is the all-important principle of repetition. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is repeat some of that color to have it help unify the design by seeing things that are familiar. I'm going to take a little of the weight off. This by just pooling a little water, softening this ending. Okay. All right. So let's let that dry. that it's drying up, I feel like I need to come back and maybe strengthen some of the shadow parts of these folds. And keep some water handy here. Okay. Especially this one back in the distance. It seems to be a little hard to see. Darken the top part of it to help bring out the highlight, and then also use some of this area in between to help with the ridge here, and the same in this area. You see now what's happened is, before the work that I did over this, you had the appearance that the peach was on a flat table, like a Formica tabletop. Well, now it looks like it's on a tablecloth because of the ridges from the folds suggested, implied. And so you change, you add a little bit more complexity to the design. So now it's just not as bland a composition as it was before. Quiet that down a little. Okay, all right. Now we've created a little variation in there, and it seems a little harsh. So when this dries, hit it with a little heat. Alright, now I'm going to clean out all my brushes. I'm going to switch to another container of water, and I'm just going to use white to finish this off. And I want to make sure that I'm using a clean palette as well, so that's going to be a little tough to do here. Let me just clean one of these sections off. Here, so I can make sure my area is free of any trace of the other hues, because I am using white and it's got to stay clean. I wanted the whiteness. I'm going to hit it again with another go with a paper towel. Okay, this will be good. Make sure my brushes are nice and clean. Alright, just pure white. I shouldn't have squeezed out so much. Alright, I'm going to use a brush to add some moisture, but I'm going to use a sponge this time, simply because I know I've already sprayed, or not sprayed, but used the dryer But I do want to get the paper wet here. I just don't want to agitate the area with brush strokes.